Lieutenant Jake Martinez was cleaning his rifle when the alarm started screaming through the USS Horizon. The sound made every crew member stop what they were doing and look up at the red lights flashing across the ceiling. Jake had heard those alarms before during training, but never during their 6-month mission exploring the outer edges of the solar system. Captain Lisa Harper's voice came through the speakers with that calm tone she used when things were getting serious. All senior staff needed to report to the bridge right away. Jake put his rifle back in its case and ran through the metal hallways of the ship. His boots made loud sounds on the floor as he moved past other crew members who looked just as confused as he felt. The bridge was full of people when Jake arrived. Dr. Amy Foster was already there looking at her tablet with worried eyes. Security Chief Ryan Brooks stood near the captain's chair with his arms crossed. Captain Harper was staring at the big screen that showed the darkness of space around Jupiter. "We got a distress signal 20 minutes ago," Captain Harper said without looking away from the screen. "The computer says it's not from any human ship we know about." She pressed some buttons and a new image appeared on the screen. Jake felt his mouth open when he saw what was floating in space near them. The ship was huge and looked like it was made of glass or crystal. It was longer than 3 football fields and had strange curves that seemed to bend the light around it. Parts of the ship were dark and Jake could see holes in the side where something had hit it hard. Small pieces of the crystal material were floating around it like a cloud of broken glass. "Any ideas what made this thing?" Captain Harper asked. "The room." Dr. Foster stepped forward and adjusted her glasses. She was the smartest person Jake knew when it came to anything that might be alien life. "The design is completely different from anything humans have ever built," Dr. Foster said while pointing at the screen. "Look at those energy readings. The ship is still powered, but barely. And there are life signs inside." She looked around the room. "We might be looking at our first real contact with aliens." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. Everyone in the space program had dreamed about this moment, but no one really expected it to happen during a routine exploration mission. The ship on the screen looked both beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Captain Harper was quiet for a long moment before she spoke again. "We're going to board that ship. I know it's risky, but we can't just leave if there are living beings inside who need help." She turned to look at Jake and Ryan. "You two will lead the boarding team with Dr. Foster. Take full gear and be ready for anything." Jake nodded and tried to look more confident than he felt. He had trained for situations like this, but training was very different from the real thing. Ryan was already making a list of what weapons and equipment they would need. Dr. Foster was gathering her medical supplies and devices for studying alien life. An hour later, Jake was floating in space wearing his heavy suit and looking at the alien ship up close. It was even more amazing than it looked on the screen. The crystal walls seemed to glow with their own light, and he could see shadows moving inside. Ryan was next to him checking his weapon one more time. Dr. Foster was behind them with a bag full of medical equipment. They found a hole in the side of the ship that was big enough for them to enter. Jake went first with his light shining into the darkness inside. The walls were smooth and curved like the inside of a cave made of glass. Strange symbols glowed along the walls in colors Jake had never seen before. The air inside the ship was breathable according to Dr. Foster's readings, but it smelled different, like flowers and electricity mixed together. They moved slowly through the curved hallways, following the life signs on their scanners. The sound of their boots echoed in the empty corridors. Then they heard it. A sound that made all 3 of them stop walking and look at each other. It was like a baby crying, but much louder, and with a strange musical quality that hurt Jake's ears. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, and made his head feel fuzzy. They followed the sound deeper into the ship until they reached a large room with a high ceiling. Jake's light revealed something that made him catch his breath. In the center of the room was a creature unlike anything he had ever imagined. She was tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of pale green metal. Her face was long and narrow, with large dark eyes that seemed to look right through him. She had 4 arms, and her fingers were longer than human fingers, but what made Jake stare was that she was clearly hurt. Dark liquid that must have been blood was coming from a cut on her side. In her arms, she was holding something small that was making the terrible crying sound. It looked like a baby version of her, with the same green skin and large eyes. The baby was thrashing around and making sounds that seemed to go right into Jake's brain and make everything hurt. The tall creature saw them and tried to stand up but fell back down because of her injuries. She said something in a voice that sounded like music and wind chimes, but Jake could not understand the words. Her large eyes looked scared and desperate as she held the crying baby closer to her chest. Dr. Foster was already pulling out her medical scanner and trying to figure out what was wrong. Ryan kept his weapon ready, but pointed at the floor. Jake found himself stepping forward, even though every part of his brain was telling him to be careful. The baby's crying was getting louder and more painful to listen to. The tall creature was trying to comfort it, but nothing she did seemed to work. Jake could see that she was getting weaker from her injuries and the stress of trying to care for the screaming infant. Something deep inside Jake's mind told him what he needed to do. He had 4 younger brothers and sisters back home, and he knew that sound. It was the sound of a baby who was scared and uncomfortable and needed someone to make them feel safe. Jake slowly took off his helmet and set it on the floor. The alien woman watched him with wide eyes as he moved closer. He kept his hands where she could see them and tried to make his voice as soft as possible. "It's okay," he said, even though he knew she probably could not understand him. "I want to help." He reached out slowly toward the baby, and the woman looked at him for a long moment before carefully letting him take the small creature. The baby alien was warm and lighter than Jake expected. Its skin felt smooth like glass but soft like regular skin underneath. The crying got quieter as soon as Jake held it against his chest. He started to rock back and forth the way he used to do with his baby sister when she would not stop crying. Then, Jake did something that surprised even himself. He started to hum a simple tune his mother used to sing to him when he was little. The baby alien stopped crying completely and looked up at Jake with its large, dark eyes. The silence in the room was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. The tall alien woman stared at Jake like she was seeing a miracle. She said something in her musical language that sounded like a question. Dr. Foster was scanning both the woman and the baby, while Ryan looked around the room for any signs of danger. Jake kept humming and rocking the baby alien, who seemed completely calm now. The woman reached out with one of her long hands and touched Jake's arm very gently. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, and Jake thought he heard something like gratitude in the strange musical sounds. That was when everything changed forever. The alien woman was trying to speak to them in broken English that sounded like she had learned it from old radio shows. Her voice was still musical, but now Jake could understand some of the words she was saying. "You help, baby," she said while pointing at the small creature that was still calm in Jake's arms. "Baby very sick. I cannot make quiet. You make quiet." Her large dark eyes looked at Jake with something that might have been wonder. "How you do this thing?" Dr. Foster was moving around the room with her scanner making soft beeping sounds as she checked everything. She had already given the alien woman some medicine for her injuries and the bleeding had stopped. The woman seemed stronger now, but she kept staring at Jake like he had done something impossible. "My name is Jake," he said slowly while still rocking the baby. "This is Dr. Foster, and that is Ryan." He pointed to each person as he said their names. The alien woman nodded and touched her chest with one of her long hands. "I am Queen Lirelai of the Zephyrian Empire," she said with pride in her voice. "This baby is Prince Zorian, my son and heir to the throne." She looked sad when she continued. "His father, the king, died in battle 3 days ago. Our ship was damaged and we barely escaped." Jake felt the weight of what she had just told them. He was holding an alien prince whose father had just died in some kind of war. The baby looked up at him with trusting eyes that seemed too old for such a small face. Dr. Foster came over with her tablet and showed them what she had discovered. "The baby appears to be healthy, but very stressed. The mother has injuries that will heal, but she's also showing signs of extreme exhaustion. I think she's been trying to care for the baby without sleep for days." Queen Lirelai nodded sadly. "In my people's way, the royal baby must be calm before we can travel safely. When baby cries like before, it makes mind pain for all Zephyrians on ship. We cannot think clearly. We cannot fly ship." She looked at Jake again. "But you make baby calm with no mind pain. This should not be possible for your kind." Ryan had been checking the rest of the ship and came back with a report that made everyone worried. There are about 20 other aliens on this ship, and they're all unconscious. The crying was affecting them worse than it affected us. They're alive, but barely responding. Queen Lyreley explained that her people were telepathic and connected to each other through their minds. When Prince Zorian was upset, his mental distress spread to everyone around him like a disease. Adult Zephyrians could usually handle it, but the baby's grief over losing his father had been too strong for anyone to bear. "But you are different," she said to Jake. "You touch baby's mind, but not through our way. You use something else, something we do not understand." Her voice became more serious. "This is very important thing. In our laws, only one who can calm the royal heir can become new ruler." Jake almost dropped the baby when he heard this. "Doctor." Foster looked up from her tablet with wide eyes. Ryan stopped checking his weapon and stared at the alien queen. "What exactly are you saying?" Jake asked, even though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Queen Lyreley stood up slowly and spoke in a formal voice that filled the room. "By the ancient laws of our people, I offer you marriage and the position of King Consort of the Zephyrian Empire. You have proven your worthiness by calming Prince Zorian when no other could do so." The silence in the room lasted so long that Jake could hear his own breathing inside his suit. The baby prince made a small, happy sound and reached up to touch Jake's face with tiny fingers. Dr. Foster was the first to speak. "Captain Harper needs to know about this right away. This is way beyond what any of us trained for." She was already reaching for her communication device. Queen Lyreley watched them carefully. "You may speak with your leader, but know this. My people are very powerful in this part of space. We have many ships and many worlds. An alliance with humans could bring great benefits to both our kinds." Her voice became softer. "But if you refuse this offer, it will be seen as an insult. Other Zephyrian nobles will not understand why a lesser species would reject such an honor." Jake felt like his head was spinning. An hour ago, he had been a simple lieutenant on an exploration mission. Now, he was being asked to marry an alien queen and become the stepfather to a baby prince. The whole thing seemed like something from a crazy dream. "I need time to think about this," Jake said while trying to keep his voice steady. "This is a very big decision that affects not just me, but both our species." Prince Zorian made another happy sound and grabbed onto Jake's finger with surprising strength. Queen Lyreley nodded. "I understand this is sudden for you, but know that my son has chosen you in a way that goes beyond our understanding. Look how calm he is in your arms. He has not been this peaceful since his father died." Dr. Foster had contacted Captain Harper and was explaining the situation in urgent whispers. Jake could hear Captain Harper's voice through the communication device, asking questions that showed how serious this had become. Ryan was looking worried as he watched the unconscious Zephyrians around the ship. "How long until your people wake up?" he asked Queen Lyreley. "Now that baby is calm, they will wake within hours," she replied. "But there will be more ships coming to find us soon. When they arrive, they will expect to find either a new king or—" She did not finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Jake looked down at the baby prince who was now sleeping peacefully in his arms. The small creature looked so helpless and innocent that Jake felt a strong urge to protect him no matter what happened. He had always been good with children, but this felt different. This felt like the baby actually needed him specifically. "What would happen to Prince Zorian if I said no?" Jake asked. Queen Lyreley's face became very sad. "Without a father figure who can calm him, he will remain distressed. Eventually, the constant mental pain will affect his development. He may never become the leader our people need." She paused. "And without a strong ruler, the Zephyrian Empire will face civil war." The weight of responsibility was crushing down on Jake's shoulders. He was just one person, but somehow his decision could affect the future of an entire alien civilization. Dr. Foster finished her call with Captain Harper and came back to the group. "The captain is sending Commander Nick Peterson with a diplomatic team," she said. "But they won't arrive for at least 6 hours. Until then, we're on our own to handle this situation." Queen Lyreley looked concerned. 6 hours may be too long. My people's rescue ships move very fast when searching for the royal family. They could arrive within 2 hours. She looked directly at Jake. "You must decide soon whether you will accept my offer." Jake felt the baby prince stir in his arms. and make a soft sound. When he looked down, the large, dark eyes were open and staring right at him with what looked like trust and love. In that moment, Jake realized that his answer had nothing to do with politics or diplomacy. It was about a baby who needed someone to care for him, and a species that might destroy itself if he walked away. Jake had always believed that protecting innocent people was worth any sacrifice. Now he had to decide if that belief extended to innocent aliens as well. The sound of approaching ships began to echo through the damaged walls of the Zephyrian vessel. Time was running out, and Jake knew that whatever he decided in the next few minutes would change his life forever. Prince Zorion reached up and touched Jake's cheek with one tiny hand. The gesture was so human and so trusting that Jake felt his decision crystallizing in his mind. Some things were bigger than fear, and bigger than the comfortable life he had planned for himself. Queen Lyrelay was watching his face carefully and seemed to see something there that gave her hope. The rescue ships arrived exactly when Queen Lyrelay had predicted. Jake watched through the crystal walls as 3 massive Zephyrian vessels surrounded the damaged royal ship. Each one was even larger than the Queen's ship and glowed with the same strange inner light. Commander Nick Peterson's voice came through Jake's communication device just as the alien ships were docking. "Jake, I'm 2 hours out, but you need to hold things together until I get there. Whatever you do, don't make any promises that could start an interstellar war." Jake almost laughed at how impossible that order was. He was still holding Prince Zorion, who seemed perfectly happy to stay in his arms. The baby had not cried once, since Jake started caring for him, and Queen Lyrelay said this was the longest peaceful time her son had experienced since his father's death. Tall Zephyrian nobles began entering the damaged ship wearing robes that sparkled with embedded crystals. They moved with grace that reminded Jake of dancers, but their faces showed the serious expressions of people dealing with a crisis. When they saw Jake holding their prince, several of them stopped walking and stared. Queen Lyrelay spoke to them, in her own language using sounds that were too musical and complex for Jake to follow. He could tell from their body language that some of the nobles were not happy about what she was telling them. One particularly tall Zephyrian with darker skin stepped forward and spoke in heavily accented English. "I am Lord Kethvar of the High Council," he said, while looking at Jake like he was something unpleasant. "The Queen tells us that you have somehow calmed Prince Zorion when our best healers could not. This seems unlikely for a primitive species." Jake felt his temper rise at being called primitive, but he kept his voice calm. "I don't know why it worked. I just treated him like any baby who needed comfort." Prince Zorion made a happy gurgling, sound as if he was agreeing with Jake. Lord Kethvar's expression became even more disapproving. "The royal heir is not just any baby, as you put it. He carries the telepathic legacy of 1,000 generations. For an alien mind to connect with him in any way should be impossible." Dr. Foster had been scanning the new arrivals and stepped forward with her findings. "Actually, that's not entirely accurate," she said, while showing her tablet to the group. "Humans do have a form of telepathic ability. It's not the same as yours, but it exists. We call it emotional intelligence and empathy." Another noble who introduced himself as Commander Veltar looked interested in what Dr. Foster was saying. "Explain this emotional intelligence," he requested. "Humans can sense and respond to the emotional states of others without direct telepathic contact," Dr. Foster explained. "We use body language, vocal tones, and instinctive responses that have developed over millions of years. When Jake calmed Prince Zorion, he was using these natural human abilities." Queen Lyrelay nodded. "This matches what I observed. Jake did not connect to my son's mind the way our people do. Instead, he used different senses to understand what the baby needed." She looked at Lord Kethvar. The result was the same. Prince Zorion was calmed, and our people were saved from the mental distress. Lord Kethvar was not convinced. "Even if this human has some crude ability to mimic our telepathic bonds, he is still an alien. The law requires that only a worthy Zephyrian noble can marry into the royal family." "The law says worthy individual," Queen Lyrelay corrected him. "It does not specify that the individual must be Zephyrian, and Jake has proven his worth by succeeding where our nobles failed." The argument continued for several minutes with voices getting louder and more agitated. Jake noticed that Prince Zorian was starting to become restless, as the adults around him became more upset. The baby's distress was beginning to affect the Zephyrian nobles, who started holding their heads like they were getting headaches. "Stop arguing," Jake said loudly enough to get everyone's attention. "You're upsetting the baby, and that's making all of you feel worse. If you want to discuss this, do it somewhere else, or keep your voices down." The room became quiet, and Jake saw several of the nobles looking at him with surprise. Lord Kethvar seemed offended that a human had dared to give orders to Zephyrian royalty. "You see," Queen Lyrale said quietly, "he understands Prince Zorian's needs better than any of us. Even now he protects my son from distress that we did not notice." Commander Veltar stepped forward. "Perhaps we should test this human's abilities more thoroughly before making any final decisions. If he truly has the skills to care for Prince Zorian, then the law supports the Queen's offer. If not, then we can find another solution." Lord Kethvar looked unhappy but nodded. "Very well. But the tests must be traditional Zephyrian trials designed to prove worthiness for royal marriage. If this human fails even one test, then the matter is settled." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What kind of tests are we talking about?" Queen Lyrale looked worried as she explained. "There are 3 trials that test wisdom, courage, and the ability to protect the royal heir. They were designed for Zephyrian physiology and telepathic abilities. I do not know if a human can complete them." "That's probably the point," Ryan whispered to Jake. "They want you to fail." The first trial was called the Maze of Shadows, and it took place in a special chamber on one of the rescue ships. Jake had to navigate through a complex maze while carrying Prince Zorian and avoiding dangerous creatures that lived in the darkness. Zephyrians would normally use their telepathy to sense the creatures and coordinate with the baby to keep both of them safe. Jake had no telepathic abilities, but he did have military training and experience with tactical situations. He studied the maze layout carefully and noticed things that the Zephyrian designers had not expected a human to see. The creatures made small sounds when they moved and left scent trails that Jake's human nose could detect. Instead of trying to avoid the creatures completely, Jake used his understanding of animal behavior to predict their movements. He created simple tools from materials in the maze to distract the creatures and establish safe zones. When Prince Zorian became frightened, Jake used the same calming techniques that had worked before. The Zephyrian nobles watched in amazement as Jake completed the maze faster than most of their own candidates had ever managed. He emerged with Prince Zorian happy and content, while having avoided all the dangerous creatures through methods none of them had ever seen before. Lord Kethvar looked displeased but could not argue with the results. "You passed the first trial, but there are 2 more. The next test is the Trial of Ancient Wisdom, where you must solve riddles that have been used for generations. The Wisdom Trial involved answering questions about Zephyrian history, culture, and philosophy. Jake knew almost nothing about any of these subjects, but he realized that the questions were designed to test judgment and reasoning ability rather than specific knowledge. When asked about resolving conflicts between noble houses, Jake drew on his experience mediating disputes between his younger siblings. When questioned about resource allocation, he used principles he had learned in military logistics training. For questions about leadership, he thought about the officers he had respected most during his career. His answers were completely different from traditional Zephyrian responses, but they showed sound reasoning and practical wisdom that impressed even Lord Kethvar. Commander Veltar commented that Jake's perspectives offered fresh solutions to old problems. The final trial was the test of protective instinct, where Jake had to keep Prince Zorian safe during a simulated attack. Multiple opponents would try to reach the baby, while Jake defended him using whatever methods he chose. This was where Jake's human advantages became most obvious. Zephyrians relied on mental coordination and energy weapons that required telepathic focusing. Jake used hand-to-hand combat techniques, improvised weapons, and tactical positioning that confused his opponents completely. He turned the testing chamber into a fortress using furniture and equipment in ways that surprised everyone watching. When attackers tried to overwhelm him with numbers, he used human guerrilla tactics to pick them off one by one while keeping Prince Zorian safely behind protective barriers he had constructed. The trial was supposed to last 30 minutes, but Jake's defense was so effective that the attackers could not get within 10 feet of the baby. Lord HFY finally called an end to the test after 45 minutes because it was clear that Jake could continue indefinitely. Prince Zorian had slept peacefully through the entire trial, apparently completely confident that Jake would keep him safe. When Jake picked up the baby after the test was over, the small prince made happy sounds and reached for Jake's face with obvious affection. The Zephyrian nobles gathered in a circle to discuss the results. Jake could not understand their musical language, but he could see from their gestures that they were having an intense debate. Queen Lyrelay stood apart from the group watching Jake with an expression he could not read. Finally, Lord HFY approached Jake with a formal expression. "You have passed all 3 trials using methods that none of our people have ever seen before. According to our law, this makes you eligible for marriage to Queen Lyrelay." He paused, and his voice became grudging. "I still believe this alliance is unwise, but I cannot argue against the evidence of your abilities." Jake felt relief and terror at the same time. He had proven that he could meet Zephyrian standards 4. Commander Nick Peterson arrived looking like he had not slept in days. His uniform was wrinkled and his hair was messy from running through the ship corridors. He took one look at Jake holding Prince Zorian and the circle of alien nobles watching them and knew this situation was even more complicated than the reports had suggested. "Jake, what exactly have you gotten yourself into?" Commander Peterson asked while trying to catch his breath. Before Jake could answer, Lord HFY stepped forward and explained the situation in his formal manner. "Your subordinate has proven his worthiness to marry Queen Lyrelay and become king consort of the Zephyrian Empire. The trials have been completed and witnessed according to our law." Commander Peterson's face went pale. "Marriage? King consort? Jake, please tell me you haven't agreed to anything yet." "I haven't given a final answer," Jake replied while adjusting Prince Zorian, who was starting to get sleepy. "But I can't just walk away from this. Look at him, Nick. This baby needs someone who can take care of him, and for some reason that someone appears to be me." Queen Lyrelay watched the exchange between the 2 humans with interest. "Commander Peterson, I understand your concern for your officer, but you must realize that this alliance could benefit both our species greatly. The Zephyrian Empire has technology and resources that could help humanity expand safely into the galaxy." Commander Peterson nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Your Majesty. But Jake is a decorated officer with responsibilities to Earth and the human space program. We can't just let him become an alien king without considering all the implications." Dr. Foster had been quietly scanning the Zephyrian nobles, and she approached Commander Peterson with a worried expression. "Sir, I think we have a bigger problem than the marriage proposal. My readings show that one of these nobles has been in recent contact with a completely different alien species." Lord HFY's reaction to Dr. Foster's statement was immediate and telling. His face changed color and his 4 hands moved nervously while he looked around the room like he was searching for an escape route. Queen Lyrelay noticed his behavior and spoke to him sharply in their musical language. Lord HFY replied with what sounded like denials, but his voice had lost its confident tone. Commander Veltar moved closer to Lord HFY and began asking questions in rapid Zephyrian. Other nobles joined the interrogation, and soon they had surrounded the nervous lord, who was clearly becoming more desperate. "What's happening?" Jake asked Queen Lyrelay while trying to keep Prince Zorian calm as the adults around him became agitated. "Lord HFY has been in contact with the Drakakon swarm," Queen Lyrelay said with anger and fear in her voice. "They are our greatest enemies and have been trying to destroy the royal bloodline for generations. If HFY told them our location..." She did not need to finish the sentence. Alarms began sounding throughout the Zephyrian ships, and Jake could see flashing lights through the crystal walls. Enemy ships were approaching fast, and everyone was about to be caught in a battle zone. Commander Peterson was already on his communication device calling for backup from the human fleet. "All ships, this is Peterson. We have hostile aliens incoming and civilians in danger. I need every available vessel here now." Lord HFY broke away from the other nobles and ran toward an escape pod. Commander Veltar tried to stop him, but the panicked Lord used some kind of energy weapon to blast his way through the ship's wall and disappeared into space just as the first Drakcon ships appeared on the horizon. Jake had never seen anything like the Drakcon vessels. They were dark and angular with surfaces that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Weapons ports glowed red along their sides, and Jake could see smaller fighter craft swarming around the larger ships like angry insects. "We need to evacuate everyone to the human ships," Commander Peterson shouted over the sound of the alarms. "Our vessels have better armor and weapons than these crystal ships." Queen Lyrelei shook her head. "The Drakcon are here for Prince Zorian. They will follow us wherever we go and attack until they kill the royal heir. Running will only delay the inevitable." Jake felt Prince Zorian start to cry as the noise and chaos around them increased. The baby's distress was beginning to affect the Zephyrian nobles again, and Jake could see them holding their heads in pain. "Everyone needs to calm down," Jake said firmly. "The baby can sense your fear, and that's making everything worse." He started rocking Prince Zorian and humming the same tune that had worked before. The baby gradually stopped crying, but Jake could see that the situation was too intense for his usual methods to work completely. The first Drakcon attack hit the royal ship and the entire vessel shook violently. Crystal walls cracked and strange. Alien lighting flickered as power systems were damaged. Jake had to hold on to a support beam to keep from falling, while protecting Prince Zorian at the same time. "The escape pods," Queen Lyrelei said urgently. "We must get Prince Zorian to safety before the ship is destroyed." But when they reached the pod bay, they found that Lord Kethvar had sabotaged the evacuation systems during his escape. Half the pods were damaged, and the remaining ones could not carry everyone who needed to evacuate. Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Queen Lyrelei and Prince Zorian take the first pod to Commander Peterson's ship. I'll stay here and help defend the evacuation." "No," Queen Lyrelei said immediately. "Prince Zorian needs you with him. Without you there to keep him calm, his distress will affect everyone on your ship, just like it affected our crew." She was right, and Jake knew it. But he also knew that people were going to die if someone did not organize a proper defense against the Drakcon attack. He looked down at Prince Zorian, who was staring up at him with those trusting dark eyes. "Then we all go together," Jake decided. "But we're not running away. We're going to make a stand and protect everyone." The next few hours were the most intense of Jake's life. He found himself coordinating between human and Zephyrian forces while carrying an alien baby who could not be separated from him for more than a few minutes without becoming distressed. The Drakcon were unlike any enemy Jake had ever faced. They fought with brutal efficiency and seemed to have no concern for their own casualties as long as they could reach Prince Zorian. Their weapons were designed to cause maximum psychological damage to telepathic species like the Zephyrians. But Jake's human military training gave him advantages that neither the Drakcon nor the Zephyrians had expected. He thought about combat differently than telepathic species did. Where they relied on mental coordination, Jake used tactical communication and individual initiative. He organized the defense using guerrilla warfare principles that confused the Drakcon, who were expecting traditional Zephyrian battle formations. Jake had human and Zephyrian fighters working in small independent groups that could adapt quickly to changing situations without relying on telepathic coordination. Prince Zorian seemed to sense that Jake was protecting him and remained calmer than anyone had expected during the battle. The baby even seemed to enjoy the tactical discussions Jake had with his fighters, as long as Jake kept him close and spoke in soothing tones. The turning point came when Jake realized that the Drakcon were using captured Zephyrian telepathic technology to track Prince Zorian's mental signature. Instead of trying to hide the baby's presence, Jake decided to use it as a weapon. "Dr. Foster, can you amplify Prince Zorian's telepathic emissions?" Jake asked during a brief pause in the fighting. "Theoretically, yes, but that would cause massive mental distress to every telepathic being in the area, including our Zephyrian allies," Dr. Foster replied. "What if we could direct it somehow? Focus it only on the Drakcon ships." Dr. Foster looked thoughtful. "It might work if we could create some kind of telepathic focusing array, but we would need Zephyrian technology and human engineering working together." Queen Lyrelei overheard their conversation. "The royal ship has amplification crystals in the throne room. If your people could modify them..." Jake was already moving toward the damaged royal ship with Prince Zorian in his arms. Ryan, get! 3 days after the battle, Jake was sitting in the medical bay of Commander Peterson's ship, watching Dr. Foster check Prince Zorian's health. The baby had recovered completely from the stress of being used as a telepathic weapon, but Jake still felt guilty about what they had been forced to do. His readings are perfect, Dr. Foster announced while putting away her scanner. Whatever connection you two have formed, it seems to be keeping him healthy and happy. Prince Zorian made a pleased sound and reached for Jake's finger as if he agreed with the doctor's assessment. Queen Lyrelai entered the medical bay looking much better than she had during the crisis. Her injuries had healed, and she had traded her damaged royal robes for simpler clothing that made her seem less intimidating and more approachable. She smiled when she saw Jake holding her son. The Zephyrian High Council has sent a formal message to your government, she told Jake and Dr. Foster. They are very impressed with how humans fought alongside our people during the battle. Many nobles who opposed our alliance have changed their minds. Commander Peterson had been dealing with the diplomatic aftermath of the crisis, and he looked tired but satisfied when he joined them in the medical bay. I just finished a long conversation with Earth Command and the Zephyrian Council. Everyone wants to establish formal relations between our species. What about Lord Kethvar? Jake asked while adjusting Prince Zorian, who was getting sleepy. We captured him when his escape pod ran out of fuel, Queen Lyrelai replied with a grim expression. He will face trial for treason and for collaborating with enemies of the Empire. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Dr. Foster had been analyzing the data from the battle, and she shared her findings with the group. The telepathic amplification technique we used could revolutionize how both our species approach communication and defense. Human engineering combined with Zephyrian telepathic technology created something neither species could achieve alone. Jake had been thinking about this same thing. The battle had shown him that humans and Zephyrians could work together in ways that made both species stronger. But it had also shown him that Prince Zorian needed stability and care that went beyond what any temporary arrangement could provide. Queen Lyrelai, I've made my decision about your marriage proposal, Jake said while looking down at the baby who was now sleeping peacefully in his arms. Everyone in the room became quiet, and Jake could feel them waiting for his answer. Queen Lyrelai's expression was calm, but he could see tension in her posture that showed how important his decision was to her. I can't marry you right now, Jake said, and saw disappointment flash across the Queen's face. Not because I don't care about you and Prince Zorian, but because marriage should be based on love and understanding that grows over time. What we have now is respect and a shared commitment to protecting your son. Queen Lyrelai nodded slowly. I understand your reasoning. Human customs around marriage are different from ours. We often marry for political reasons and develop affection later. But I do want to be part of Prince Zorian's life, Jake continued. If you'll let me, I'd like to become his guardian and cultural ambassador between our species. I want to help him grow up understanding both human and Zephyrian ways. And the relief on Queen Lyrelai's face was obvious. That is exactly what I hoped you would say. Prince Zorian needs someone who can teach him about different perspectives and ways of thinking. And She paused and looked a little embarrassed. I would like the chance to know you better as a person, rather than just as a political necessity. Commander Peterson looked pleased with this solution. Earth Command has already approved Jake for extended diplomatic duty if he chooses to accept it. We're establishing a joint research station where humans and Zephyrians can work together on projects that benefit both species. Dr. Foster was excited about the research possibilities. Jake imagined what we could learn about telepathy, crystalline, technology, space travel. This could advance human knowledge by centuries. Prince Zorian woke up and looked around the room at all the adults discussing his future. When his eyes met Jake's, the baby smiled and made happy sounds that seemed to express approval of the arrangements being made. There is one more thing we should discuss, Queen Lyrelai said carefully. The connection between you and Prince Zorian appears to be permanent. My son has bonded with you in a way that our scientists say should be impossible between different species. What does that mean exactly? Jake asked. It means that Prince Zorian will always need you in his life, she explained. As he grows older, the bond may change, but it will never disappear completely. You have become as important to him as any biological parent. Jake felt the weight of this responsibility, but also a deep sense of satisfaction. He had found something he was uniquely suited for, and that genuinely mattered. Then I guess we're all going to be spending a lot of time together learning how to make this work. 6 months later, Jake was standing in the main hall of the new Joint Research Station, watching Prince Zorian take his first steps. The baby had grown quickly and was now walking between Jake and Queen Lyrelay while making excited sounds in both English and Zephyrian. The research station was built using both human and Zephyrian technology, and it looked like something from a science fiction movie. Crystal walls curved around metal frameworks while holographic displays showed data from dozens of ongoing projects. Human and Zephyrian scientists worked side by side on everything from faster-than-light travel to telepathic communication devices. Dr. Foster had become the head of the xenobiology department, and she was constantly amazed by what they were discovering. Jake, you should see the latest findings about human-Zephyrian hybrid genetics. The theoretical children would have advantages that neither species possesses alone. Jake felt his face get warm at the implications of what Dr. Foster was suggesting. He and Queen Lyrelay had been spending more time together as they co-parented. Prince Zorian and he had to admit that his feelings for her were becoming more than just friendship and respect. Queen Lyrelay seemed to sense his thoughts and gave him a knowing smile. Dr. Foster is very optimistic about the future possibilities of our alliance, she said with amusement in her voice. Let's focus on raising the prince we already have before we start planning for more children, Jake replied while trying to keep his voice casual. But he noticed that Queen Lyrelay's smile became warmer when he said we instead of you. Prince Zorian had learned to say simple words in both languages, and his favorite word was clearly Jake, which he repeated constantly while trying to climb onto Jake's shoulders. The toddler had also developed the ability to project his emotions telepathically to other Zephyrians while somehow protecting Jake from any mental feedback. He's going to be an amazing leader someday, Jake said while lifting Prince Zorian up, so the boy could see the research labs through the crystal walls. He already understands both human and Zephyrian ways of thinking. Commander Peterson visited the station regularly, and he always seemed impressed by how well the mixed community was functioning. I have to admit, Jake, when you first told me you were thinking about marrying an alien queen, I thought you had lost your mind. But this arrangement is working out better than anyone expected. The marriage question had not gone away completely. Jake and Queen Lyrelay both knew that their relationship was moving in that direction, but they were taking their time to build something real rather than just politically convenient. Prince Zorian seemed to approve of the growing affection between his two primary caregivers. I have been thinking about human marriage customs, Queen Lyrelay said one evening while they were putting Prince Zorian to bed. Perhaps when you are ready you could propose to me the way humans do instead of accepting my formal offer. Jake looked at her beautiful alien features that had become so familiar and dear to him. I think I'd like that, he said. But let's give it another few months. I want to be sure that we're choosing each other for the right reasons. Prince Zorian fell asleep holding both of their hands, and Jake realized that they had already become a family in everything but name. The formal ceremonies and official announcements could wait until they were both certain that their love was real, rather than just a product of shared responsibilities. A year later, Jake was mediating a trade dispute between human colonists and Zephyrian merchants when he realized how much his life had changed. He was using skills he had developed as a parent and diplomat to solve problems that affected thousands of people across multiple star systems. The techniques he had learned from calming a crying alien baby had somehow prepared him to bridge the gap between entire civilizations. Human emotional intelligence combined with Zephyrian telepathic sensitivity created new ways of understanding and resolving conflicts. Prince Zorian was now old enough to attend some of these diplomatic meetings, and he would sit quietly in Jake's lap, watching the proceedings with intelligent eyes. The boy was learning that his role as future leader meant helping different groups of people work together rather than ruling over them. You've created something remarkable here, Dr. Foster told Jake after a particularly successful negotiation. This hybrid approach to diplomacy could change how species interact throughout the galaxy. Queen Lyrelay had been watching Jake work, and she approached.